Students, in this video we will deal with the themes and symbols in The French Lieutenant's Woman by John Fowles. In the previous videos we have already discussed details about the author, the major terms related to the work, character analysis and the plot summary. So this will be the final installment in the video series on French Lieutenant's Woman. So we have already discussed the setting of the novel, what happens in the novel, who are the major characters, what is the major conflict in the novel, and we have discussed the narratological features of the novel, that is specifically the fact that the narrator himself enters the plot once in a while and also the multiple endings to the novel. So now we will look at the themes. The first one is fiction and history versus reality. So, in this work, there is always an interplay. Throughout the novel, there's an interplay between these three things: fiction, history, and reality. Let's see how John Fowles sets up these three factors within this novel. So, The French Lieutenant's Woman is a work of historiographical metafiction, as we already discussed. So, it means that it is a work of fiction which is based on history, and it draws attention to its own quality of being imagined rather than real. അതായത് the work itself understands that it's not real, that it's a work of fiction and it is based on history. So considering this novel, we can see that it is set in the Victorian period. It is set in 1867. It is written in the style of a Victorian novel, even though it has been written in the second half of the 20th century. It is written in the style of a Victorian novel, and it even features certain real historical figures. And in between, the narrator appears in the plot and says, okay, I need to make changes to the plot. I need to make a change to the ending. This is not the ideal ending. So he himself, he's kind of a stand-in for the author himself, and he understands that this is a story and the story is actively being constructed by himself. The narrator comments on the process of inventing plot and character. So why is this a choice? Why has John Fowles inserted the narrator into the story like this? He uses this to comment on the nature of the past and the present, that is the parallels between fiction and history. So the reason why this is a Victorian novel is because there are several stylistic similarities between Victorian novels and history books. അതായത് ഞാൻ നേരത്തെ പറഞ്ഞു ഒരു ഓംനിഷ്യൻ പോയിന്റ് ഓഫ് വ്യൂവിലുള്ള അതായത് തേർഡ് പേഴ്സൺ നരേറ്ററാണ് മിക്ക വിക്ടോറിയൻ നോവൽസിനും ഉള്ളത്. പണ്ടൊരിടത്ത് അങ്ങനെ തുടങ്ങുന്ന ആ രീതിയിലുള്ളൊരു കഥയാണ് മിക്ക വിക്ടോറിയൻ നോവൽസിലും. ആൻഡ് if you have read any history books, the history books are also written in a similar way. That is, in 300 AD or BC, or in such and such year, this thing happened. In 1066, the Battle of Hastings happened and the Normans invaded England. So there, the events of history are set out as fact. We know that those things actually happened and it is presented in that way. In the same way, in a Victorian novel, the plot points are also presented to the reader as fact. That is the first similarity. Then the second one is that it has a commitment to realism. അതായത് ലൈക്ക് ഐ സെഡ്, ഓംനിഷ്യൻ നരേറ്റർ ഉണ്ട്, അതിൻ്റെ പുറമേ തന്നെ അതിൽ പറയുന്ന കാര്യങ്ങളൊക്കെ സത്യമാണ് എന്നുള്ള രീതിയിലാണ് ആ കഥ പ്രസൻറ്റ് ചെയ്യുന്നത്. അതായത് അതൊരു സ്റ്റോറിയാണെന്നുള്ള രീതിയിലല്ല. സോ considering these two things in a Victorian novel, what happens when a narrator is introduced? A narrator who actively makes comments on the plot with a lot of uncertainty, a lot of biased opinion, and etc. What happens then? He even says that he himself is shaping the story. So this is done by Fowles to suggest that stories, whether they're true or not, are always constructed. That is, they are imagined, reimagined and retold by people. So this technique is used by Fowles to ask the reader to consider our own perception of reality and history. That is, reality and history are always shaped by narratives, and these narratives are partially imagined by people and they are presented as true. For example, when we read in the history that in 1066 the Battle of Hastings happened, and these are the things that led to it, these are the things that happened after it, these were the main people who participated in it, we can only believe that, right? We don't actually see what happened in 1066 in Hastings. We don't know that. We can only believe what is presented to us, like a story. Stories are also like that. We can only believe what the storyteller is telling us. So Fowles is telling us that history and narrative are similar, history and fiction are similar, and that there is a parallel between the two. Another thing that Fowles is doing here is that he's telling us that there is always a shift in the ideas over time. That is, our beliefs, our values, our ideologies change over time. അതായത് പണ്ട് അക്സെപ്റ്റബിൾ ആയിരുന്ന ഒരു കാര്യം ഇപ്പോൾ അക്സെപ്റ്റഡ് ആകണമെന്നില്ല. ഫോർ എക്സാമ്പിൾ, ഏർലിയർ ചൈൽഡ് മാരേജ് വാസ് ഡൺ in our country. Sati was done in our country. There was a lot of such things as that happened as a result of the patriarchal society. But do we accept these things today? Now we know that in our present day reality, in our present ideology, we firmly believe that sati is wrong. We firmly believe that child marriage is wrong, and there are even laws to prevent these things. So ideas change over time. Ideas, some things that we believe to be true or what we believe to be correct, will not be considered in the same way by the future generations. In the exact same way that we have certain problems with our past, we have certain points of difference with our own past. This novel is set in 1867. The plot is happening in 1867, but the book is published in 1969. So John Fowles, the writer, is writing with the perspective of the late 20th century. He's writing about the previous century, the society that existed then, but with the perspective and with the value system of the 20th century. When the narrator consistently interrupts the plot with insight and observation from the future, it is meant to change our present day misconception about the Victorians. From our present day ideas, we will think of the Victorians in a certain way, and the author is trying to change that. Or he is trying to illustrate an idea that the Victorians had about themselves. That is, the Victorians have certain ideas about themselves that no longer exists today, that is, exists in our present day. For example, the first thing he does is that Charles is shown as a very dutiful person. He is driven by a sense of duty. അതായത്, as we explained in our previous video, Charles is a member of the nobility and he is going to be married to Ernestina, right? And that is the safe choice. As a member of the nobility, he is supposed to marry a woman of good standing in the society, a woman preferably rich. If possible, he should marry another aristocrat, but if not, the woman should at least be rich. So that is why he's going to marry Ernestina. അല്ലാതെ അയാൾക്ക് ഒരിക്കലും ഏർണസ്റ്റീനയോട് യഥാർത്ഥമായ പ്രണയമില്ല, യഥാർത്ഥമായ സ്നേഹമില്ല. The more they spend time with each other, the more their differences are apparent to him, and the more he realizes that I cannot be with this woman. If I marry this woman, I cannot be happy. And that's why he goes after Sarah, even though Sarah is a very he's an outcast in the society. Nobody likes her. Everybody believes these rumors about her. She is believed to be a fallen woman, that is an immoral woman. She's the worst choice that he could pick for a wife. Still, he goes after her. So in the beginning of the story, we see that he is very much driven by his sense of duty. അതായത് അയാൾക്ക് ഇഷ്ടമില്ലെങ്കിൽ പോലും അയാളുടെ സോഷ്യൽ സ്റ്റാൻഡിങ് കാരണവും അയാളുടെ ആ ഒരു ആൻസസ്റ്റേഴ്സ് എന്താണ് അയാളുടെ അടുത്ത് നിന്ന് എക്സ്പെക്ട് ചെയ്യുന്നത്, വാട്ട് ഡു ഹിസ് പേരൻസ് എക്സ്പെക്ട് ഓഫ് ഹിം, വാട്ട് ഡു ഹിസ് ആൻസസ്റ്റേഴ്സ് എക്സ്പെക്ട് ഓഫ് ഹിം, അതനുസരിച്ച് ജീവിക്കാൻ ശ്രമിക്കുന്ന ഒരാളാണ് ചാൾസ്. That is why he goes to marry Ernestina. But as time goes on, he understands that it is not important to live according to the past. നമ്മുടെ ലൈഫ് നമ്മുടേത് മാത്രമാണ്, നമ്മുടെ പൂർവികർ പറയുന്ന അനുസരിച്ചല്ല നമ്മൾ ജീവിക്കേണ്ടത്. അങ്ങനെ ഒരു കൺക്ലൂഷനിലേക്ക് ചാൾസ് എത്തിച്ചേരുന്നു. He believes that his life is his own and he should be able to make his own choice. That's when he breaks with the past and goes to Exeter in search of Sarah. So through this shift in his character, the author is trying to tell us that we should be careful we should be careful of worshipping the past or idealizing the past. Like, we might have seen people saying that, oh, annathe kaalath ellam nalladayirunnu, back then. One example I will tell you, people constantly say that in our parents' generation, divorce was not a thing. People did not get divorced. There was true love back then. People stayed together till the end of their life. But now people don't value relationships. People are getting divorced everywhere. There is no true love anymore. People say this is people idealize the past. I'm just giving you an example from our current society. But is this true? Can we say that this statement is entirely true? പണ്ട് പ്രണയം ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു, ഇപ്പോൾ പ്രണയമില്ല. പണ്ട് ആളുകൾ ഒന്നിച്ച് മരണം വരെ ഒന്നിച്ച് ജീവിക്കുമായിരുന്നു, ഇപ്പോൾ അതില്ല. So the statistics show that it's true. Of course, divorce rates are higher now. But is it because now nobody loves each other? Or is it because women have acquired education and women have acquired financial independence that allow them to escape from an abusive situation? Pande, people say that couples stayed together because of love, but that's not always true. Even if the woman was being abused, even if the woman was not loved by her husband, she did not have a choice of getting a divorce, because most women were homemakers. Very few women had their own job or their own property or own source of income to help them remove themselves from an abusive situation or from an abusive household. So this is an example where people idealize the past. പണ്ട് അങ്ങനെയായിരുന്നു, പണ്ട് നല്ലതായിരുന്നു, പണ്ട് എല്ലാവരും ഇന്നസെന്റ് ആയിരുന്നു, ഇപ്പോഴങ്ങനെയല്ല. On the surface level, we might feel that it's true, but if you look closer at this statement, at these types of statement, we can understand that that's not true. There are certain reasons why life in the past was like that, and there are certain reasons why life in the present is the way it is now. So Fowles is telling us that ചാൾസ് ചെയ്തതുപോലെ നമ്മൾ നമ്മുടെ പാസ്റ്റിനെ ഐഡിയലൈസ് ചെയ്യരുത്. പാസ്റ്റിൻ്റെതായ കുഴപ്പങ്ങളുണ്ടായിരുന്നു, പ്രസൻറ്റിൻ്റെതായ കുഴപ്പങ്ങളുണ്ട്. ഈച്ച് ഇറ കംസ് വിത്ത് ഇറ്റ്സ് ഓൺ പോസിറ്റീവ് factors and negative factors, and we must be objective about it. Fowles is also using this idea of duty to show us that the Victorians' choices, personal choices, their own idea of their self, their identity, these are all limited and shaped by the ideology of their era. Victorian society was a highly moralistic society. അപ്പോൾ അവരുടെ ആ മൊറാലിറ്റിയെ ബേസ് ചെയ്താണ് അവർ ജീവിച്ചിരുന്നത്. ആൻഡ് ആ മൊറാലിറ്റി കാരണം അവരുടെ പല ചോയ്സസും അവർക്ക് ലിമിറ്റഡ് ആയിരുന്നു. So Fowles is telling us we should also look at our own contemporary ideas and our own understanding of society to and understand how it shapes our actions. Our present day ideology also shapes our actions, and maybe people who come in the future will criticize us like we criticize the Victorians. So one example of this is the stock character of the fallen woman. അതായത് here, who is the fallen woman here? Sarah Woodruff is the fallen woman. She is shown as an immoral woman, so much so that everyone ostracizes her from the society. Is shown as a person who seduces men. In the beginning, she supposedly seduced the so-called French lieutenant, and now she is seducing or tantalizing Charles and making him break his engagement. So she is shown as a dangerous element in the society. But that is the Victorian view of things, right? The Victorians saw her that way. The Victorians saw her as immoral. The Victorians saw her as dangerous. But when we look at her from our present day perspective, നമ്മളൊരു modern day reader ആയിട്ട് സാറ എന്ന ക്യാരക്ടറിനെ അനലൈസ് ചെയ്യുമ്പോൾ we can see that she is somebody who is oppressed by the norms of that time. പുള്ളിക്കാരി who was she actually? Everyone was calling her an immoral woman who just went ahead and slept with this French lieutenant. But we know that she was actually a virgin. We know that she has never been with a man. So was society right? No. So from our perspective, we can see that she was just a normal woman, but everyone was oppressing her. Everyone was giving her this label of a fallen woman and keeping her as an outcast, or judging her for no reason, and judging her for no fault of her own. Here, Fowles is telling us that stories can never be objective. The same story will always mean something different in a different era. അതായത് we can see examples where recently during COVID time, a lot of people started movie roasting channels. They would take movies that were hits from the 90s and the early 2000s and roast them, saying that this is very patriarchal, the women characters are not given any importance. അങ്ങനെയൊക്കെ പറയുന്ന വീഡിയോസ് നിങ്ങൾ കണ്ടിട്ടുണ്ടാവും. Why does this happen? Because our ideas of how we should live change over time. നമ്മളുടെ മൊറാലിറ്റിയെക്കുറിച്ചുള്ള ഐഡിയാസ്, നമ്മുടെ ലൈഫ്, ഹൗ വി ഷുഡ് ലിവ്, അവർ ഐഡിയോളജി ചേഞ്ചസ് ഓവർ ടൈം. സോ വാട്ട് ഈസ് റൈറ്റ് ഇൻ ദ പ്രസൻറ്റ് ഇസ് നോട്ട് റൈറ്റ് ഇൻ ദ ഫ്യൂച്ചർ. And we can see that this Charles's relationship with the past evolves over the course of the novel. That is, in the beginning, he's very dutiful. He's very keen on upholding his values, upholding his social norms. But he understands that, especially when he's sitting in the church, he understands that he needs to divorce the past from the present. He can no longer live as though his family or his ancestors are judging his behavior. He needs to live his own life. And he breaks away from his engagement with Ernestina and goes after Sarah. So choosing to break up with Ernestina makes him happy. But does he achieve fulfillment by going after Sarah? Because there are multiple endings. In the second ending, in the first ending, he imagines that he's with Ernestina. In the second ending, he ends up with Sarah. It's shown that they will probably end up together. So there he's happy. But in the alternate ending, what happens? He misunderstands what she is trying to tell him and storms out of the house, and they end up being separated. And it just completely throws his life into disarray. Because അയാൾ കല്യാണം കഴിക്കാൻ നിന്ന കുട്ടിയും ഇപ്പോൾ ഇല്ല, കല്യാണം കഴിക്കണമെന്ന് ആഗ്രഹിച്ച സ്ത്രീയുമായിട്ടും ഇപ്പോൾ ഇല്ല. അവസാനം ചാൾസ് ഒറ്റയ്ക്ക് നടന്നു പോവുകയാണ്. ആൻഡ് ഹീ ബിലീവ്സ് ദാറ്റ് ലൈഫ് മസ്റ്റ് ബി എൻഡ്യോർഡ്. ലൈഫ് ഇസ് നോട്ട് ടു ബി എൻജോയ്ഡ്, ഇറ്റ് മസ്റ്റ് ബി എൻഡ്യോർഡ്. വാട്ട് എവർ സഫറിങ് ലൈഫ് ത്രോസ് അറ്റ് us, ഇറ്റ് മസ്റ്റ് ബി എൻഡ്യോർഡ്. അങ്ങനെ വിചാരിച്ച് വളരെ ഒരു നെഗറ്റീവ് വ്യൂവിൽ അദ്ദേഹം പോകുന്നതായിട്ടാണ് കഥ അവസാനിക്കുന്നത്. So, past, we cannot completely deny the past, and we cannot completely forget the present also. So, these things have to be grappled on its own terms. We cannot completely separate these two things. We must be objective about it. That is the theme of fiction, history, and reality. How history and reality are intermingled, are mixed up together, and reality and history are both narratives, are both a kind of fiction. Moving on to the second theme, storytelling and morality. So how are these two elements presented in the novel? John Fowles uses metafiction to do this. What is metafiction? Writing that is self-conscious about the fact that it is written. So writing that is self-aware, writing that knows that it is fiction. So he uses this in the conventions of a Victorian love story in order to make us understand how is the act of storytelling itself help to shape our understanding of the world. Okay. So storytelling is simply not a way of showing the world as it is. It's not just a way of stating facts. It's also a powerful tool to change or influence or manipulate the way in which we understand the world. Okay. So while you were reading the story, did any of you think, why does Sarah tell everyone or tell people that she was in love with a French lieutenant? കാരണം അന്നത്തെ ഒരു സൊസൈറ്റിയുടെ ആ ഒരു കൺവെൻഷൻ വെച്ചിട്ട് a woman who had relations before marriage would be seen as a immoral woman and she would be ostracized. അപ്പോൾ അത്രയും പ്രശ്നങ്ങൾ ഉണ്ടാകും എന്നറിഞ്ഞിട്ടും സാറ എന്തുകൊണ്ടാണ് ഇങ്ങനൊരു വലിയ കള്ളം പറയുന്നത്, ദാറ്റ് ഷീ വാസ് ഇൻ ലവ് വിത്ത് ദിസ് മാൻ? It is because Sarah already has certain problems. Sarah is already an outcast. ഈ സ്റ്റോറി ഇൻവെൻറ്റ് ചെയ്യുന്നതിന് മുമ്പ് തന്നെ സാറ ഒരു ഔട്ട്കാസ്റ്റ് ആണ്. How, like we discussed before, she is the daughter of a farmer. So she is born in the lower class. She cannot fit into any other class in the society. But she has education. So she was working as a governess. അപ്പോൾ പുള്ളിക്കാരി അപ്പർ ക്ലാസ്സും അല്ല ലോവർ ക്ലാസ്സും അല്ല. എഡ്യൂക്കേഷൻ കിട്ടിക്കഴിയുമ്പോൾ ഷീ ഈസ് ഔട്ട്സൈഡ് ഓഫ് ദ peasant class, but she is not truly a member of the middle class or upper class because she is not born in a higher or a more wealthier family or a noble family. So she is already an outcast. In order to make sense of this, അതായത് ഇങ്ങനെ ഉള്ള സാറയുടെ ഈ ഔട്ട്കാസ്റ്റ് ആയിരിക്കുന്ന ഈ സ്ഥിതി ആർക്കും മനസ്സിലാവില്ല. ഈ ക്ലാസ് ഡിഫറൻസ് കൊണ്ടുള്ള ഈ ഒരു ostracization. Other people in the society will not understand her suffering. So in order to make them understand it in a better way, she invents a story that will be more legible to them or more intelligible to them. അതായത് they can understand that a woman who has relations before marriage will be ostracized, or she's a bad woman, or she's an outcast. അതവർക്ക് മനസ്സിലാവും. So she invented this story in order to make her suffering more visible. Without this story, Sarah's true suffering would have actually gone unnoticed. If the story was not invented, Charles would never have paid attention to Sarah. Charles would never have known Sarah. He would never have fallen in love with her. So, Sarah, by inventing this story, shaped her own life and that of Charles. The next thing that Fowles tries to tell using this technique is that storytelling makes it easier for us to judge people. It makes it easier for us to judge characters. അതായത് if you consider the villain in a story and the villain dies in the end, we will think വില്ലൻ കുഴപ്പം കാണിച്ചത് കൊണ്ടാണ് വില്ലൻ അവസാനം മരിച്ചത് ഓർ ഹീറോ അയാളെ കൊന്നത്. സോ ദർ ദ ഡെത്ത് ഇസ് കൈൻഡ് ഓഫ് ജസ്റ്റിഫൈഡ് ഓർ ഇറ്റ് ഈസ് ജസ്റ്റിഫൈഡ് ഇൻ അവർ മൈൻഡ്. അവൻ അർഹിച്ചത് തന്നെ അവന് കിട്ടി. that would be our judgment. So Victorian novels use this technique. If a character has a death or a character has a negative ending at the end of the book, it shows that the character had bad behavior or did a wrong thing or sinned. That's why that character suffered at the end. So it allows the readers to make judgment on the character or moral judgment on the character. On the other hand, if the character ends up having a happy ending or wins the love of his or her life or achieves his or her goals, it means that it was ultimately because the character was good and he or she has been rewarded for their goodness. That is the understanding. So such kind of writings makes it easier for us to judge characters, and Fowles turns it on his head. അപ്പോൾ എൻഡിങ്ങിനെ ബേസ് ചെയ്തിട്ടാണ് ക്യാരക്ടറിനെ ജഡ്ജ് ചെയ്യേണ്ടതെങ്കിൽ ഈ നോവലിന് 3 എൻഡിങ് ഉണ്ട്. സോ ഹൗ ഡു യു ജഡ്ജ് ദീസ് ക്യാരക്ടേഴ്സ്? Can you say that Sarah is a good person, or Charles is a good person, or Ernestina is a good person? So let's look at these 3 different endings. So in the first ending, that is the conventional Victorian ending, Charles resists Sarah and he ends up marrying Ernestina. So that shows that sticking to social convention over personal desire is a good thing. It's noble. It's the right thing to do. The second, but what happens? Fowles says that this is just his imagination. This is just Charles's imagination. It's not the true ending. In the second ending, Charles ends up with Sarah and their daughter. So it suggests that if you go against the rules of the society and favor one's own principles or one's own desires, then that is right, and eventually you will be rewarded for it. Then the third ending is that there is Charles is lonely and bitter, and he is in exile. He does not have the woman he was originally supposed to marry, and he does not have his lover either. So it shows that he rebelled against society, and he also did not regard Sarah's actual desires. Sarah says that she does not want to get married, and he accuses her of leading him on, and he is misguided. അപ്പോൾ സൊസൈറ്റിയുമായിട്ട് റിബൽ ചെയ്തത് കൊണ്ട് അൾട്ടിമേറ്റ്ലി അയാൾക്ക് എന്ത് സംഭവിച്ചു? ഹി എൻഡഡ് അപ്പ് ബീങ് ലോൺലി. അതാണ് തേർഡ് എൻഡിങ്ങിൻ്റെ മീനിങ്. സോ ഈച്ച് എൻഡിങ് reflects on the preceding events that led up to it and gives different meanings. But none of these endings are the true ending. അപ്പോൾ when there is no true ending, what are we supposed to understand? The reader is left with an open-ended novel. അതായത് നമ്മൾക്ക് ഈ ക്യാരക്ടേഴ്സിനെ ജഡ്ജ് ചെയ്യാൻ പറ്റില്ല, because there are so many different endings, and we cannot judge these characters based on the endings. We cannot judge the novel itself based on the endings. Through this, Fowles is trying to tell us that morality is naturally not found in events. അതായത് when a thing happens, when an event happens, the event itself does not have any morality in it. നമ്മളാണ് അതിൽ മൊറാലിറ്റി കൊടുക്കുന്നത്, നമ്മളാണ് അതിനൊരു മീനിങ് കൊടുക്കുന്നത്, നമ്മളാണ് അതിനൊരു മെസ്സേജ് കൊടുക്കുന്നത്. ഓക്കെ, so we construct our own meaning, we construct our own morality through storytelling. Okay, students, we have looked at 2 themes now. We will look at the remaining themes in the following videos.